Hey everybody, this is Perch. Here's a viewer mail that asks a unique question, which I like. It goes, "Hey Perch, simple question for you. Why aren't there more comic books featuring villains? Not villains as a character, villain as the main star of the book, like the recent Joker series. It feels like with all of the heroes and the villains, and the tendency for current writers to want to write complex villains, that a lot of villains could just carry their own book. Why not a Lex Luthor book, or a Cheetah book, or a Sinestro book? We kind of had a Sinestro book. Well, we not kind of. We did just have a Sinestro book. What am I saying? Over on the Marvel side, you could have a Doctor Doom book. We had that too. Why aren't there more ongoing series featuring villains? So to answer that, I mean, first off, kind of as mentioned, there have been a lot. I mean, not as many as the hero books to be sure, but keep in mind we've had Doctor Doom, we've had Kang, we've had Juggernaut. Although I think the Juggernaut was a good guy at that time, maybe. We have the Joker, as mentioned. We're getting a second series of the Joker after the first one ended. We had a Sinestro book. We've had tons of villain books actually. Definitely not as much as a hero book, and I think there is something that goes into the thinking when you're putting these comics out, where they almost the villains have to be a limited series in their minds, or the villains you can't do a good ongoing series. Although Doctor Doom was an ongoing, so the point here is it definitely does happen. You do have villain books, but I do think the villain maybe a different way to take your point, because I don't think your point is wrong. I just think there is proof. We have a Sabretooth book that came out, and they're doing another Sabretooth book now, another series. I think Sabretooth and the Exiles, is that what it is? Anyway, so they do this. But I think the thinking at the publishers are that if it's a villain-based book, then it has to be kind of a limited series. It has to be short-term. It has to be, it's different. I mean, hell, we've had a Taskmaster too. Now I keep thinking of more and more and more. There's been lots of them. But in general, they don't. What's strange is, I think the writers step into villains. So, like, we need to give them complex backstories, and we need to, provide some real depth and some motivation for what they're doing. And in many cases, it's become the same backstory over and over. It's like, miserable childhood, and girl rejected them, kind of pushed them into evil, and they didn't really want to get there, but then something snapped, and now they're evil. Kind of is the same plot. But when it comes to doing a villain series, it almost becomes like, is the villain, they have to pose the villain in some kind of heroic way. Like with the Kang series, you had an opportunity to just show this sociopath, maniacal, conqueror, just despicable person. And they wrote it more along the lines of, hey, here's young Kang, and he's actually not a bad guy. And then old Kang has kind of corrupted him to some extent, but then you kind of see how old Kang got to where he was, and as young Kang grows up. But you kind of just want a series. And I seem to remember there was a Venom series, I think. I think Chris Bacalo was the artist on it. And it was during the Dark Reign bit. And as I recall, the villain was just like 8 people and was just terrible. And that's kind of what, I mean, like if you were to get a Doctor Doom book, and we had the recent Doctor Doom book, it was Doctor Doom is framed for a crime he didn't commit, and now he's on the run. And then Kang's screwing around with him, and then but wouldn't you read a book where the character was just outright evil in it? Like, let the character be themselves. You can still do the complexity and the backstory and all that kind of stuff in there, but you just let the character be, irredeemable, like maybe the comic Irredeemable, or some of what they did in The Boys. I understand The Boys was the main focus was on the good guys, quote unquote, there, but let the villains just do super villainous things. And I think you can't run 20 books like that all at the same time, but you could write one. You could do a couple. Like if you were to do a Lex Luthor ongoing series, the what would make that comic great is to have Lex Luthor thoroughly despicable, causing harm, doing terrible things, and you kind of you set up a little supporting characters after him, kind of like the Joker book that came out recently. Jim Gordon was maybe the true star of that book, but it was called the Joker because that was Jim. But they knew that they would sell the Joker; they wouldn't sell it if it was called Jim Gordon. But in that book, even the premise of that was, the Joker has been framed for a crime he didn't commit. Now, the Joker is a homicidal maniac, so it makes sense that somebody would track him down regardless of this latest crime at Arkham. But, that they always tend to do that with the villains. So I think you could run a villain book or two ongoing, not a miniseries, not redemption. You don't, like, if you're going to do the Sabretooth book, you don't have to pose questions like, is it immoral to have this level of kind of hellish punishment that the X-Men did in the pit that Sabretooth was thrown into, and do you find that you agree a little bit with him? Like, don't take that part out of it. Make the character complex, but also make the character an irredeemable villain, and then run a comic that way. And I think it could be, if you wrote it the right way, it could be very popular. We've seen comics shown that way. I mean, I would argue Sinestro was closer along those lines. I mean, they definitely showed a different side to Sinestro, but he was still, he wasn't changed from himself really in that book. I mean, there was other things going on. I'm trying to think. I just think it would be popular. The Red Lanterns book, that was a completely different beast altogether, but the Red Lanterns book certainly was about, Rageville and then Guy Gardner and how he was going to handle all that. And so, it's kind of a Sons of Anarchy style type story there. I don't know. I think that as we're looking for more diversity in comics, one aspect of diversity you could jump onto is the diversity of, have a villain who is a true villain as a lead character in a series for that villain, and let it go. Let's see what happens. I think the Joker is played out, but I mean, there's a couple of characters where that could be pretty interesting. I think somebody could give a pretty good pitch to do a Cheetah book. I don't know, where she's just, a villain on the run, escaping crime. I mean, you could do that. You could have the villain still be a villain and go up against other villains. That's what I kind of hope the Taskmaster story would be, not some kind of here's why he's not such a bad guy, but instead more of a, here's why he's totally a bad guy, and here's where the villains have to every now and then eat each other. That would a story like Civil War, rather than do the next Marvel event, which is just a different version of Civil War, like Avengers X-Men or Avengers X-Men Eternals or whatever, maybe you could just have a villain version of Civil War. What happens when the villains all go at each other? I think there's a couple interesting things you can do. Anyway, there you go. So those series are out there. You got to look for them, but they definitely exist. And, let me know. What are some villain comics that you've enjoyed? The person listening to this right now, what have you liked? What have they done well? What have they done wrong? Is there a commonality that you can pick up, beyond just maybe good writing that makes one work and not the other? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, as always. And thanks for listening.